Hi there, my name is Paula Garcia Todd, and I am a chemical engineer. I have a bachelor's and a master's in chemical engineering, and I've spent my whole career, 17 years, in the pharmaceutical space because I grew up knowing that I wanted to help people feel better. And that's what really drove me to come into this space. But let me tell you a little bit about myself first. So, I am originally from Brazil. And when I was about 9 years old, we moved to the US. And I was incredibly blessed to come from a family of engineers. So, my dad and my grandfather and my uncles and all my brothers, they're all engineers. So, I grew up surrounded by all of these examples and all the various ways that engineers help people and solve a lot of problems. And so, just seeing that, I already had that sense that engineering was something that I wanted to potentially try. So my story begins in how I really ended up in engineering in middle school. Um, you know, there are these math placement tests that you take early on, either fifth, sixth grade or so. And I tested really, really high in math. And the guidance counselor actually called my parents in to talk to them. And they said that they had never had a Hispanic student score so high on a math test. And so they thought that there was some kind of mistake that had taken place. And again, so lucky and blessed that my dad was in the room. And my dad, being an engineer, knew that I could potentially have this affinity for math as he did. And he said, no, no, I believe the test scores are correct. And so if she is testing into a high math class, I want to go ahead and put her there. And the guidance counselor kind of said, it might be too challenging. It might be too much for her. And my dad really fought back and said, no, if she deserves to be in that class, she should take that class. And so, sure enough, I got placed into a higher level math class, which really helped me. As I progressed in middle school and high school, I was able to get into those AP calculus type classes, which you don't need if you really want to go into engineering, but it certainly helps because there is a lot of math involved with engineering. And so by the time I went to college, I felt really prepared to take on all of those math classes and the engineering classes because I had seen a lot of that math early on. So, again, how lucky am I to have this amazing family filled with nerdy engineers like me? But most importantly, that were always encouraging and never allowed me to doubt myself, which is really important. And if you don't have someone in your life who is taking on that role, then you need to take that on yourself and know that you shouldn't doubt yourself. This is actually one of the biggest pieces of advice that I like to give kids because we've all been there. Um, just because something feels hard doesn't mean that you weren't meant to do it. So if you really love math or if you really love science and you encounter, it might be a math problem or it might be an area in your science class that's really hard for you to grasp. Might take a lot of practice, may take a lot of study for you to really comprehend it and really get it. It's okay. Totally okay. It doesn't mean that you weren't meant to do math and you weren't meant to do science if you really love it. All of us have encountered that. All of us have encountered really hard problems that we've had to overcome. And it's just naturally part of growing up and especially part of doing STEM. STEM can be hard, and it's okay. So, with all of that being said, now you know a little bit about my background, where I came from, and then let me take it from there of, college and beyond. So, I ended up going to Penn State for chemical engineering, like I said. I chose chemical engineering because at a very early age, I knew I wanted to help sick people feel better. Now, truth be said, I faint at the sight of blood. Not kidding. I have 3 kids. Trust me, when they get hurt, they have to go to dad because I don't manage it well. So the next probable career for me, if I couldn't do medicine and I really wanted to help sick people feel better, was pharmaceuticals. I personally didn't want to go straight into pharmaceuticals because I wanted to choose a major that was broad and that would allow me flexibility to change my mind later on if I wanted to. And engineering is very broad. And chemical engineering is very broad because the beauty of chemical engineering is that chemistry is literally everywhere. So chemical engineers are needed in almost any major industry. They're needed in pharmaceuticals where I work. They're needed in food science. They're needed in textiles to make clothing. They're needed in oil and gas to keep your cars running. They're needed in electronics. Your computers and your phones wouldn't work without some chemistry behind it. So, chemical engineering was a nice, broad background that I felt could take me in a lot of different directions, but still gave me what I needed to go into pharmaceuticals. So, it worked out really well for me. My sophomore year, I got really interested in research. And I started to kind of do a little research of my own of what the chemical engineering professors were studying at Penn State and what their research was about. And I met this one professor who later became my advisor, was doing this really cool research in biotechnology. He was taking plants and he was genetically modifying them to produce all kinds of different therapeutic proteins or basically medicine. I thought it was the coolest thing. So I was still a sophomore, mind you, so still not a lot of chemical engineering classes under my belt. And I approached him and I said, hey, I think what you do is really cool. Would you ever consider taking an undergraduate student like myself under your belt? And he said, yeah, absolutely. We can get you started in the lab. And it started with, little experiments that grew into bigger experiments. And by the time I hit my senior year, my advisor sat me down and he said, Paula, here's the deal. You've done enough research that you could graduate with a master's if you're willing to stay the extra year, take the master's classes, the graduate level courses that you would need, finish out your research, write a thesis. You could graduate with both a bachelor's and a master's at the same time within 5 years. And I said, wow, this is a really good opportunity. So I took it and I did it. I'm really glad I did, but I will tell you, it was super hard. That last year, I was trying to cram a lot. I was taking really hard level classes. I was finishing my research, writing my thesis, and having to prepare to defend it. It was a lot to take on in a year, but it was really worth the effort because I knew, especially wanting to go into pharmaceuticals and having talked to enough people in the industry and having had internships in that space too, that's really important. Hands on experiences. I knew that a lot of people in pharmaceuticals either had a master's or a PhD, and that would be of value to me if I really wanted to pursue the space. And so, yeah, it worked out. And coming out of school, I got my first job and I've done a lot of different types of jobs. Again, the beauty of having the STEM background that allows you to just kind of move and shift and try different things all within the technical space. So, my very first class was, or my very first job was what I like to call the classical chemical engineering job. I would take processes that are created at lab scale. So that's what a chemist does. A chemist creates, let's say they develop a new molecule. And the way to develop a new molecule is always done in a lab setting. So it's the job of a chemical engineer to take that process and scale it up because a chemist is only making milligrams to grams at a given time. So, say you find a cure to cancer. How are you going to get that to all of the cancer patients? You need a chemical engineer who can take that process, create a big production plant, a manufacturing plant with big reactors and big machine and equipment to be able to produce tons, metric tons or kilograms of that essential material to be distributed to everybody who needs it. So, like I said, my first job was just that. In the pharmaceutical space, I was taking active pharmaceutical molecules. I was taking those processes and scaling them up from lab scale to what we call pilot plant, which is kind of like this middle scale to make sure that things look good. You're still making the right molecules, the process is working. And then from there, manufacturing commercial scale. So I learned a lot. Working in a manufacturing setting was super fun. Uh, Imagine hard hat, the whole deal. It was a lot of fun. But after doing that for about 3 years, again, if you recall in college, I really enjoyed this research aspect. I decided that I really wanted to try a job that brought me back into the lab. And so within the same company, I started asking around and talking to people. And sure enough, I found that role. And I went back into the lab and I was developing new molecules for drug delivery. So not necessarily the active ingredient or, what you might think of the actual medicine or the molecule that's giving you that therapeutic effect that you need, but there's a bunch of other stuff that goes into that pill that you take to ensure that the drug is being delivered to the right place at the right time. And for that, we use a lot of different types of products, including polymers, which are these really long molecular chains that have really cool properties that allow you to do all kinds of cool things. So I started working in that space and I started creating new polymers and new products that would help in the delivery of the drug inside the body. So after doing that for a few years and really getting a good understanding of our products and how they worked in the human body and how they worked with different active ingredients, I went into a role called technical service. And that role was crazy fun because what it meant is that I basically got a chance to travel the world, visit different pharmaceutical companies, and help solve their problems using our products. And so I would talk to formulators to help maybe change the chemistries that were going into their pills, or I would work with their manufacturing guys. Maybe they were trying to make this product, but it was going through the process. They were running into issues. It was sticky. It just wasn't flowing. And we'd come up with different ways to solve those problems. So again, engineering is just problem solving. Like I saw it when I was little, watching my brothers and watching my dad. And now here I was problem solving, but in the pharmaceutical space. Loads of fun and loads of fun to travel around the world and see new cultures and meet new people. Such a growing experience. So cool. From there, I made a huge change in my career. There was a marketing director at the time who kind of recruited me and said, "Hey, have you ever considered doing anything in business or marketing?" And I said, "No, absolutely not. I know nothing about that. And I love the technical space that I play in." And he said, "I think you'll be surprised at how much you still need your technical skills to be successful in business whenever you are still in a technical area like pharmaceuticals." And so he convinced me to try a marketing role. So the very first role I tried was marketing research, which was a good blend because marketing research is still a lot of research and a lot of data crunching. So I was still in my element, so to speak. I was used to doing those things. But now instead of taking data from the lab, I was taking data from the market and analyzing it. And that introduced me to the world of marketing. Before I started doing marketing, I thought marketing was the equivalent of advertising. And it's not, it's not at all. Marketing is really understanding what are the problems that people are facing and how are you coming up with those solutions? And once you come up with those solutions, how are you going to put it out into the marketplace? How are you going to get that into the hands of the people who want it and need it? And it's also an interesting lens to have because there are a lot of cool, innovative ideas that you may have. But if you don't have a market for it, if you don't have people that are interested in it, it may not succeed. And so it's nice to have that background and that understanding that having cool technology is not enough. You got to have people that want it or need it for it to be financially successful. And so that's the role that I play now. So for marketing research, I did various types of business roles and product management and brand management. And now I sit in a strategic marketing role, which is really cool because I'm basically setting the strategy for our whole business of how we're going to continue to grow. How are we going to use our resources, use our people to build new innovations, to continue to grow in the products that we already have. How do we help with our manufacturing facilities, ensure that the quality is right? There are a lot of different factors that I look at. So it's very multifunctional. Um, and although I'm sitting in a business role, like the bit like that marketing director said, I do use a lot of my technical knowledge and my technical experience day in, day out to be able to do this marketing job, believe it or not. So, another learning to take from this is that STEM jobs provide you this amazing background that really does give you that flexibility to maybe change directions as you progress in your career because it's a lot easier to teach someone with that deep technical background the business side and how to run a business than it is to take a business person and then try to teach them that deep technical knowledge to be able to go in and talk to the customer base. It's a lot harder to do that. So, if anything, I have seen people with STEM backgrounds change in crazy ways. I've seen people going to law school, medical school. I've seen people go do the switch to business like I did. There are a lot of different ways that you can go with your technical background. You don't always have to stay in a technical role. And that is amazing flexibility that, a lot of other career paths don't necessarily give you. Um, you know, I think that thinking about doing a STEM type of job or career is, something that all kids should really consider because studying STEM is really about studying how to problem solve and how to affect the world around you. So I would have never guessed that today I would be sitting in a role or a job where I'm basically impacting one third of all the pharmaceutical products out there globally. One third of pharmaceutical products use a product that's in my portfolio and that our company makes. Think about that. I went into STEM or engineering thinking that I would be solving problems and impacting the world around me and impacting it in a positive way, improving the lives of people around me. But now here I am doing a role where I'm impacting the lives of people around the globe. And that is the real magic of STEM because the work that you do extends so much further and broader than you ever would have imagined it to. Um, the reality is, by the time you guys grow up, um, we don't quite know what problems we're going to be trying to solve. I think some are still going to remain, right? Things like climate change, changes in technology, all of these trends are clear. They'll continue, right? But there will probably be new problems that we'll be facing. And having a deep technical background, understanding the world of math and science, those are really the fundamentals that will allow us and you guys, as you guys grow up, to solve any problems that come your way. So think about that. Think about those things. STEM is not for everybody. It's okay if you don't feel like it's something that you really want to pursue or you have an interest in. But if you do, I really want you to consider all the amazing benefits and all the amazing things that you could be doing for the people all around you by choosing a STEM career. It's really cool. and it's really impactful, and it really makes you feel like every day you're doing something really meaningful and amazing for the world, which is awesome. As I mentioned, STEM is hard, so you will face setbacks, but please don't ever doubt yourself, and please don't ever let that hold you back. The other issue that you may run into is, similarly to me, as I mentioned, I was lucky that I had role models, but if you were paying attention, none of those role models were women. I'm the first woman in my family to go into engineering. It's okay to be a first in your world, and know that just because there aren't people that necessarily look like you around you doing the things that you want to do, it doesn't mean that they don't exist. There are plenty of women that have gone into engineering. I work with a lot of women. I had no idea that they were out there. And I'm so glad that that didn't let, that not seeing them, um, you know, deterred me in any way from choosing engineering. I'm glad I pursued that and I continued that, and similarly for the fact that I'm Latina. Um, I didn't see a lot of Latinas in my classes. But that's okay. It's okay to not necessarily see that around you, but just know that we're out there, right? And so there will be people that are a lot more like you doing the things that you want to do, even if you can't see them. So, anyways, I hope that you've learned a little bit about my journey, my experiences in STEM. Um, you know, Whatever it is that you choose to pursue, I wish you guys all the very best of luck. And if you ever wanted to contact me, ask any questions, or just follow me, I am on Instagram at Watch Me STEM. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk to you. Take care.